Erasistratus finally got the chance to dissect the human brain in 322 BC. Less concerned with identifying the soul, they concentrated on basic physiology, discovering the network of fibres that run from the brain to the spine and out around the body, what we now refer to as the nervous system. It was down in the gladiator stadium, however, where the brain really came into its own. The philosopher, physician and writer Claudius Galen was forbidden by Roman law from dissecting the human brain for himself, so instead he would head to the dusty arena where he could gain a snapshot of the brain's anatomy by treating blooded soldiers whose skulls had been torn apart in combat. But it was his experiments on live squealing pigs that caused the biggest sensation. In front of a large crowd, he would slice through the laryngeal nerve connecting the pig's voice box to its brain and watch as the pig fell silent. The crowds would gasp. Galen had offered the first public demonstration that the mind, not the heart, controlled our behaviour. Galen also discovered 4 cavities within the human brain, later called ventricles. We now know that ventricles are spaces containing fluid that protects the brain against physical knocks and disease. But Galen's prevailing view was that all aspects of the immortal soul floated around these ventricles. It then passed into animal spirits, which were pumped around the body. This explanation particularly suited those high up in the Christian church, who were growing increasingly concerned about the idea that the brain could provide a physical basis for the soul. How could something be immortal if it was present in such frail flesh? It was much more palatable to place our soul in these empty spaces instead. Galen's theories of the brain reigned for 15 centuries, and religion continued to influence those who built upon his ideas. René Descartes, for instance, famously declared that the mind and the body were separate, what is now known as dualism. The mind was immaterial and did not follow the laws of physics. Instead, he said, it did its bidding via the pineal gland, a small pine nut-shaped region in the centre of the brain. The pineal gland would move, letting out the particular animal spirit required to carry out the soul's needs. His purpose in showing this distinction was to rebut those irreligious people who would not believe in the soul's immortality without a scientific demonstration of it. But it was in the dirty, smoke-filled streets of 17th century Oxford where things really started to get interesting. Down in the bowels of the city's university, a resourceful young physician called Thomas Willis was sharpening his scalpel. In front of a large audience of anatomists, philosophers and interested public, he would carve up the human body and brain, demonstrating its intricate anatomy to anyone who cared to watch. He had been given permission to do so by King Charles I, who allowed him to dissect any criminal sentenced to death within the city. It was thanks to this that he created meticulous illustrations of the human brain and was said to have become addicted to the opening of heads. I mention Willis, for it was he who really began to cement the idea that our human identity was connected to the brain. He started to match the altered behaviour he observed during his patients' lives to deformities he discovered during autopsy. For instance, he noted that people who had pains in the back of their head, near to an area of the brain called the cerebellum, also had pain in their heart. To prove that the two were linked, Willis opened up a live dog and clamped the nerves running between the two. The dog's heart stopped and the animal died almost immediately. Willis went on to examine how the brain's chemistry might produce other behaviours: dreams, imagination and memories. It was a project that he called neurology. In the 19th century, the German anatomist Franz Joseph Gall pulled us closer still to our modern understanding of the brain by advocating the idea of localization. The brain, he said, was comprised of specific compartments, each responsible for a fundamental faculty or tendency, including a talent for poetry and an instinct for murder. He also thought that the shape of the skull could determine personality. Gall had a friend who had big, bulging eyes, and because his friend also had a fantastic memory and was great with languages, he believed that the brain regions responsible for these abilities must be located behind the eyes and had grown so large that they were pushing the eyeballs outwards. Despite phrenology later being discredited, Gall's idea of the brain being made up of discrete regions was prescient. In some cases, he was even correct in pinpointing their responsibilities. His organ of mirthfulness, for instance, was placed towards the front of the head, just above the eyes. In later years, neurologists would come to stimulate this area, and in doing so, make a patient burst out laughing. Gall's observations ushered in a new age of the brain, one that separated itself from the philosophy-driven science of prior centuries.